Good evening. Okay, well, in the interest of time, I think we'll go ahead and get started. So welcome, first of all, to this financial aid session tonight, which is going to cover a few things for you. Sorry about that. In advance twice, we're going to cover some FAFSA basics. This is the first in a three-part series. So my name is Tracy Pavon, and I am the Assistant Vice President for Enrollment and Financial Assistance at Simpson. I've been working at Simpson for 30 years. And I was a student prior to that. And for those of you who are parents on the session tonight, I will tell you that my oldest son went to Simpson and graduated a few years ago. And I have two other children, my last one in college now. So I kind of understand the FAFSA through the eyes of my job and also the eyes of a parent trying to fund an education. So this is the first in a three-part series that we are doing tonight. We're going to cover FAFSA basics. Tuesday of next week, we're going to cover COVID-related special circumstances, and we'll talk more about that next Tuesday. And then the following Thursday, we're really going to do kind of a timeline and just questions and answers, anything you need to ask. You will have time for questions and answers tonight as well, but we will keep you at about 20 to 25 minutes tonight, so this won't take real long. We're trying to deliver it in little short, punchy, quick sessions. So our agenda, we're just going to go over some FAFSA basics and some of our top tips, and then questions and answers. Okay, I already told you who I am, so we're going to take that down. So the FAFSA stands for the Free Application for Federal Student Aid. My biggest emphasis there is going to be free. If you have not done your FAFSA yet, there is a FAFSA website that is not legitimate and it is not free. Don't do that one because the FAFSA, the legitimate FAFSA, is free. Free Application for Federal Student Aid. So that FAFSA application opened for filing on October 1st of 2020. So you've had a couple weeks. It will open on October 1st every year. So when you're entering when you're a freshman in college and you're getting ready to do your sophomore FAFSA, just remember October 1st, you can do that. Different colleges and universities will have varying deadlines. To qualify for state funds, if you are an Iowa resident, you must file your FAFSA prior to July 1st of 2021. So you have a lot of time. But hopefully you're doing it before that. You must use your 2019 federal tax information to complete the FAFSA. Now, a lot of times I will have a family say, well, we're going to do our 2020 taxes here in just a few months or in a month now. So we're going to wait and use that. But I want to be perfectly clear that you cannot choose to use another year's tax returns. Legally, you must use your 2019 federal tax returns to complete the FAFSA. You file the FAFSA at the website that I have listed here, which is federalstudentaid.gov. And you must have an FSA user ID and password for the student and for one of the parents if the student is a dependent student. That FSA user ID and password acts as your signature for the FAFSA. When you register for an FSA user ID and password, you must have separate emails. So, for example, when I did it for my children, my daughter Libby, I had to use her email address to get hers, and I had to use my personal email address to get my user ID and password. The system is sophisticated enough that if you try to use the same email address, it will say, no, you already have someone with that email address. So sometimes that stumps people a little bit. Your student is more than likely dependent. There are a series of about 12 questions on the FAFSA that you will walk through to determine if the student is dependent. But I will tell you that the biggest mistake people think, well, I didn't claim that my son is a dependent on my tax return, so he must be independent, has nothing to do with your tax return status. Okay, so the FAFSA will collect demographic information and financial information about both the student and the parent to calculate what is called an EFC. Financial aid people use a lot of acronyms. EFC stands for Expected Family Contribution. And the expected family contribution is literally a measurement of the student's and the family's ability to pay post-secondary educational expenses in that year, okay? It is made up of a student contribution from their income and their assets and a parent contribution from their income and their assets, okay? And together, added together, they make up the EFC, which is, again, expected family contribution. The EFC then is delivered to the colleges and universities, and that is what we use to determine the student's financial need. And it's what we use to package your student's financial aid. Keep in mind, this is just a snapshot in time of your family's financial situation as it exists today. That snapshot will change over time, which is why you do the FAFSA annually. So, this FAFSA is based on your 2019 income. Your student's sophomore year FAFSA will be based on your 2020 income, so on and so forth, recognizing that situations do change. Okay, and I think this is a good spot for me to say the next session that I conduct next Tuesday, which will be about 25 minutes long as well, is going to go over special circumstances or extenuating circumstances. And I want to explain just really quickly what that is so that if you're interested in that session, you can log on. Because the FAFSA's EFC is calculated on 2019's information, your situation may have changed. And that's true any year, but that is particularly true this year during COVID. So perhaps in 2019, both the student's mom and dad had a great job and things were going great. Perhaps somebody has lost a job now or lost a job and had to take a job at a lower income. We're going to cover how we can accommodate those situations next Tuesday. But I did want to mention them now because I think it's very important, particularly during COVID. These are the things that if the student hasn't completed the FAFSA yet, they need to have on hand. And if they have these records on hand when they sit down to do it, it's really going to make the process quite simple. They need to have their social security number, their driver's license, W-2 forms from 2019, and any other record of money that they've earned, their 2019 federal 1040, which is their tax return, any untaxed income records. So if you are putting payments into a tax-deferred pension and savings plan or any child support received, anything like that. Records of taxable earnings from federal work study, which probably none of them will have because they're in high school. They need to have their current bank statements. And if you own a business, you need to have that business and investment information. So if you have investments, you need to have those available so that you can get the value of those investments. Okay. Scholarships and grants, if the student received, which this is very rare and your students are in high school, so probably not the case, but if a student were to receive a scholarship that was in excess of tuition, we would need them to have that with them as well. It's very rare, but it does happen. Tips, I can tell you, apply early. And even though it opened in October, you're still early if you can get that done this month. Apply online by all means. Use the IRS data retrieval tool. I'm going to explain that to you right now. So the Internal Revenue Service talks to the FAFSA, if you will. When your student completes the FAFSA and they get to the part on the form where they're going to enter income information, they're actually going to say, yes, I want to use the IRS data retrieval tool. They will exit the FAFSA website, confirm who they are, and they enter the IRS website. And then they can retrieve their information and your information and say, yes, please just transfer this information right from my 2019 federal tax return to my FAFSA so that I don't have to answer all these questions. You just do it for me. It is really slick. It works very well, and it will largely lessen your chances for having to supply additional information because we know that it's correct. Okay. This is the best clue I can give you tonight. If you do the FAFSA and use the IRS data retrieval tool, you have to type in your address exactly and precisely how it is on your federal tax return. So as an example, if you live on Southeast 61st Street, like I do, and your tax return does not have the little ST after 61st, so it just says SE61 Street, you have to type it in exactly like that. And if you add the little ST, it won't match. If on your tax return it is in all caps, you have to type it in all caps. If on your tax return street is spelled out, you have to spell it out. If it's just ST with a period, you have to do that. So you need to have your tax return in front of you and match that address exactly and precisely how it is. Okay. I can't encourage you enough to use the IRS data retrieval tool if you can. There are a few people who won't be able to, and it will tell you those circumstances, but most of you will be able to. Complete all the blanks on the FAFSA unless you are specifically told to leave it blank. I get a drink really quick. Okay, so an example would be in our country, if you are male and 18, you must be registered with Selective Service in order to receive federal student aid, including loans. So one of the questions on the FAFSA will say, are you male or female? If you check female, and it will say, are you born male or female? If you check female, it's going to skip you right through the Selective Service because females in our country are not required to be registered with the Selective Service. If you are male, it's going to go ahead and ask you those questions, the additional questions. Are you registered? Are you 18? Yes or no? And then are you registered? It will tell you once in a while, leave this blank if it doesn't apply. But for the most part, if it's, you'll put in a 0. You don't leave it blank. Read all of your instructions. And there's a little help tool when you do the FAFSA off to the right side. You can ask for additional help. It's going to be, pardon me, very specific. So it will tell you exactly if you filed a federal 1040 transfer line, whatever, here. It'll give you the exact instructions. And then by all means, when you're doing the FAFSA, if you need help, call us or email us. That is what we do. That's what I've done for 30 years. And I will get stumped from time to time on a FAFSA and have to research the answer, but we would like to help you. Okay, so common mistakes. I already said don't leave fields blank. Do not use commas or decimal points. Every year we have a student who will put in, they maybe mean to put in $60,000, but they'll put in decimal points. So they put in $6 million. That obviously impacts your financial aid a lot if you do that. So no decimal points or commas. The biggest mistake that we see that is the hardest to fix is an incorrect or a transposed social security number. The FAFSA, when you complete it and your student submits it, it's going out to all kinds of federal databases and checking your eligibility. So it's going out to Department of Homeland Security to make sure that you are an eligible citizen, that you have a social security number, that it matches the birth date, that you are basically who you say you are. And so sometimes we see, like I complete my students' FAFSAs, I make them sit with me and so they kind of understand it, but I do it. It would be really easy for me to accidentally put my social security number in when I'm filling out my daughter's information. You just want to make sure that you have that correct. Okay. Failing to use the fuller legal name. So I had my daughter drive when she did the FAFSA and she put in Libby Pavon. Her name is Elizabeth Pavon, but we call her Libby. So you have to use that legal name, the same name that's on the social security card. Use the permanent address, the home address. So that really applies more for college students, not to use that one. One huge mistake, people often put in the wrong federal income tax paid amount. Again, if you use that IRS data retrieval tool, you don't have to worry about that because it sends it over for you. But make sure you're following line for line what it's telling you to put in. So it's not going to just say, put in your federal income tax paid. It will say, put in your federal income tax paid. And by the way, this is line number such and such on your federal tax return. So, incorrect tax filing status. When you fill out your tax return, it'll tell you up in the upper left-hand corner if you are single, married, filing jointly, filing as head of household, whatever. You want to make sure you're putting the right thing in there. Again, if you use the IRS data retrieval tool, it will populate for you. And then listing the student's marital status incorrectly. A lot of times, again, I think parents think that means them. Just make sure you know whether you're on the student or parent part of the FAFSA. More mistakes, listing your parents' marital status incorrectly. Make sure that you realize that you have to list both parents' information. And families look very different today. There are a lot of different situations, and we know that. So it's typically, if it's a divorce situation, it is typically the parent. It's the FAFSA definition is who provides more than 50% of that child's support is the parent on the FAFSA. Okay. And that's typically who the student lives with. And if your parent is remarried, and even if they've only been remarried for 3 hours when you do the FAFSA, you have to put the step parent's income on there too. Okay. So in a divorce situation, you're putting the parent that the student lives with and their significant other if they're married or have a significant other in the household. Okay. When you do the FAFSA, if there's an unborn child in the household, if somebody is pregnant, you get to count them as a part of the household. And these are, again, the most common mistakes that I'm going through. Make sure you count yourself as a student. So when you do the FAFSA, for example, if you have mom, dad, and 3 children in the household, you have 5 in the household. And if the student that's doing the FAFSA and say their brother go to college, you would put 2 students in college, okay? Also, and this one's huge, many times people forget that both the student and the parent have to sign the FAFSA electronically with that FSA user ID and password that we talked about at the beginning. Even if you go back into the FAFSA, let's say, for example, that the student filled out the FAFSA and they were not considering Simpson. They were only looking at Iowa State and they sent it to Iowa State. And then a few weeks later, they saw the light and said, I want to look at Simpson. They would add Simpson to the FAFSA. Both the parent and the student have to sign that FAFSA because you are releasing your personal information to a new college now. So the student can't be the only one that signs it. The parent also has to say, yep, you can go ahead and release my information. So every time you change that FAFSA, you both need to sign. Financial need, I just like to go over this. So, that expected family contribution that we talked about in the beginning, that's what you're doing when you do the FAFSA. The whole thing is to kick out this expected family contribution to the college. So the cost of attendance at the college minus the EFC, or expected family contribution, is what equals financial need. And financial need is what we can award you in scholarships and grants and loans. And then I always like to provide this comparison for very obvious reasons. In this chart over on the left, I have a red, a yellow, and a blue. It kind of looks pink, yellow, and blue on here. The cost of attendance is variable depending on the school you're looking at. So in this situation, number one, or the pink bar, might be Simpson College. Number two, or the yellow bar, might be a state university. And number three could be a community college. Obviously, our costs vary. The expected family contribution is the green bar in the middle. That's always constant. It doesn't matter if you're going to Simpson or a state university or a community college. That EFC is constant wherever you go. So then on the far right, those graphs show you that X, Y, and Z are the financial need that you would have. So, the cost of attending Simpson minus the EFC gives you that need of X. So I can give you that much financial aid. A state university could give you Y, and the community college could give you the Z. Hope that makes sense. Just a quick timeline. Make sure that you're filling out your FAFSA right now. Be sure that you have already completed your application for admission. And if you haven't, get that done right away. As soon as you are accepted to Simpson, you're going to get a scholarship letter that tells you here's your minimum scholarship for 4 years. We want you to visit. We want you to visit in person if you can. And if you're not comfortable with that, we can do virtual visits still. But we are taking both types of visits. We are practicing social distancing and mask wearing, and we feel very safe on campus. And then Simpson's financial aid office will be following up with you in terms of any additional paperwork that you will need to do. And then we'll be actually mailing our financial aid packets in January. So then I just kind of want to go over questions and see if any of you have any questions. I would welcome you to either type them in the chat box or unmute yourself and ask away, and I'll try to answer any questions that you would have. I hope this is what you wanted tonight. So keep in mind at Simpson, all of the scholarships and grants may not be based on your FAFSA. An average financial aid package, I don't like to talk about averages because everybody's situation is so different. However, I will tell you that a minimum award at Simpson that's gift aid, so scholarships and grants, a minimum for your students would be $23,000 a year. That can go up to $29,000 a year to start with, and then we have state and federal aid on top of that. Average financial aid package at Simpson, gift aid is probably, because you kind of want to know gift and loans. And again, I don't really like to get into averages, but it is very common for us to get pretty close to a state school amount. Maybe that will help. So our scholarship amounts are really based on your high school GPA. We have taken the ACT primarily out of the mix this year due to, first of all, we are test optional at Simpson, but we've completely removed that due to COVID and test scores, and it's very hard to test. So we're going to look at your GPA from high school. There are a lot of scholarships, special scholarships that you can apply for at Simpson, and those are on our website, and those are due February 1st for the most part, but those have to do with special interests or passions that you might have. For example, we have a Carver Fellowship for Social Justice. So if you are interested in social justice issues, you can get $2,000 a year to participate in that program. We have a Culver Fellowship at the John C. Culver program on our campus. Students get involved in the political scene, and they can get $2,000 a year for doing so. We have speech, debate, and mock trial scholarships, theater, music. We have interfaith scholarships. We have just a myriad of different layered scholarships. So you have that initial scholarship that's based on your GPA, and then we stack on top of that anything that you're eligible for based on the FAFSA, and then we stack on top of that all of the special scholarships. I should mention that if you complete your free application for federal student aid FAFSA and apply for admissions with a complete applications prior to January 1, and you are not eligible, there are 4 states that are excluded due to other grants. You will get an additional $2,000 a year just for doing that, just for doing your FAFSA by January 1st and completing your application by January 1st. So if you haven't done those things and you're online with me right now, you have almost a month left to do that and meet that deadline. That is $8,000 more over 4 years. So worth logging on tonight just to hear that piece. Okay. Well, you guys have been great. I do want to give you my email address in case you have specific questions that you would like to ask and you just weren't comfortable for some reason tonight. If you send those questions to finaid@simpson.edu, so that would be like financial aid abbreviated, FINAID@simpson.edu, we will get back to you with an answer. I hope you will consider joining us for the next 2, and I hope this was helpful tonight. Thank you all so much and have a great evening.